try to be quick. There was a book written, I think, over 30 years ago called How to Diet on a Poisoned Planet. And I think the book, although it was about what we eat, what we take in, we have to realize that we're being poisoned every day through the media, through songs, through radio, through television, and what our image of black boys and men are is pushed through that lens. And so what I like about Jacoby's story is, if I was actually giving a keynote in Chicago, and it was 4 keynote speakers back to back. One that preceded me had a story much like yours, where he was at the playground with his son, and everybody was complimenting him about, oh wow, you really engaged with your son. And he hadn't figured it out. He was a young professor. And he hadn't figured this out, but he had said, I had to write in my diary about what that really meant, and I'm still struggling. And I'm sitting in the audience, I said, I'll clear it up. When I got on stage and I was talking, I said, now the CDC is not pro-black, but the CDC in its statistics say that black men are more involved with their children, whether married or unmarried, than any other racial group. But you all won't believe that, even if you're black, even with a story like Jacoby's. You won't believe it because of what we've been taught. And just because some of you didn't have your father there, you blow that up to mean that all black fathers are like that, right? And we have to realize that our universities are failing us too. Just because you have a PhD or MD don't make you smart. The APA just apologized in 2021 for its role in systemic racism. It was George Stanley Hall who founded APA, who said, and I'm going to quote this because I don't want to mess it up, he proposed that Africans, Indians, and Chinese were members of adolescent races in a stage of incomplete growth, right? And so this is what has been gone through our institutions of higher learning and our research, so much so that people like Samuel Cartwright in 1851, his book, Drapetomania, said that black people had a mental disorder if they, these are enslaved black people, if they ran away from slavery. That was a diagnosis. The treatment was to whip the devil out of them. Other diagnoses were dysphagia aethiopica, and which is rascality, chronic leprosy, which explained why black people have dark skin, big lips, and big noses. Furor sexualis, which also talked about the immoral hypersexuality. So that hyper stuff goes way back. Hypermasculinity was researched in prisons and then put on the general population. It's not about unhealthy manhood or masculinity or healthy. When he explained, his father was divorced, but he was involved. That happens more than we know. But if you leave it to television, if you leave it to everything else, we have a horrible image of black men, men in general. If you don't succeed in your life, well, my father wasn't there. If I succeed and my father wasn't there, well, my mama was there. Men can't win for losing. So if you're there, you're a problem. If you're not there, you're a problem. And if you're a boy growing up in an environment that hates boys, or wants to put them on drugs, or to put them into detention, or into special ed, just because of how they look, how am I supposed to sit there in a classroom and feel that someone cares about me and that I'm loved? How am I really supposed to learn and grow up to be the model of a father that I had in my household or down the street? So we're all blamed. We have to push back from what we're reading, what we're watching, and what we're allowing into our households, because it's killing us as a people.
So, as we were being introduced, I was sitting up there and I kept hearing all these accomplished names. As these, professional black men were being called, I was comparing myself to them. I was like, oh wow, like I don't know what I got myself into. I don't know if I belong here. And I think it kind of relates to the topic of comparison. They talk in the film, comparison is a thief of happiness. And I think that's a really powerful saying. I was sitting up there comparing myself, and as soon as I sat down, I was like, why am I doing that? You know, you should feel like you belong where you are, no matter what. So I think it's really important to understand that. Try not to compare yourself. And it kind of brings me to my next topic. Young men like to compare themselves, and it's kind of a thief to what masculinity means. In high school, they talk about this in the film, but we didn't show it. It was like having more women or being a womanizer makes you more of a man. I think that was a huge issue in high school, especially college and so on and so forth. A lot of times young men like to compare with the amount of women they've slept with, the amount of women they've been with, and it creates a divide, and it destroys confidence in young men, and it's really destructive. Something that luckily the film addressed, but I wish we were able to actually see it to understand the example. And I've had that experience myself growing up. I didn't have the women that I wanted, I guess. And a lot of my friends were talking about, I did this, I did that, and we'd compare each other. And I would be upset, and I would take that out, you know, through violent actions, fighting in high school, other things like that that weren't meant to be a sign of masculinity, but it's something that we perpetuate and we believe is a sign of masculinity. So I think that's something that really was destructive. Something I took away from the activity that we did earlier was a lot of people on their mask said that confidence was something that they like to show. And it really struck me that a lot of people really aren't confident, they just try to be. Trying to be confident will help you in a lot of aspects of your life, but it's good to understand that not everyone is as secure as they put out to be. And part of being a man or being anybody is being vulnerable and showing your insecurities and learning from that and growing from that. And I think just as I was walking down the stairs, I was like, I shouldn't be so insecure that I might not be as qualified as everyone on this panel, but I can still speak my truth, tell the people who I am, what it's like to be a man. So, yeah.
Again, I wish there was more time for us to dive into all of the questions, but we do have time for one more question. And this last question is definitely going to be one to, address what Dr. Smith was saying when we were being shown the negative and not the opposite of that, which is, something that's uplifting and positive that can cause us to stay in a state of stagnation. So this last question says, how can we introduce, teach, and reinforce social emotional intelligence among men? The addendum question says, how can we liberate our minds, bodies, and souls from the bondage of emotional incarceration as men? And that term comes from Jason Wilson.
That's a great question. I think something like this is a great example of how we could do that. It's a great way to educate people. Education is probably the most powerful way of kind of destroying these perceptions of what someone should be, what masculinity is, or femininity, or whatever it may be, and bringing on a panel of a bunch of different men with different experiences, just talking about what it's like. What it's like to be a man, what it's like to grow up as a black man in Utah or wherever it may be. It's a great way to educate the youth. Also, therapy is extremely important. I can attest that I personally never been to therapy, but I understand how important it is. Growing up in an immigrant family, therapy is not something I was introduced to. Being black, it's also something that, at least through media, is not kind of perpetuated as something that we do, because your therapist is not going to be someone who understands what you're going through. And I've always had that misconception until, I spoke to other black men who did go through therapy, and they told me what it's like and how it actually helped them. So I think it's a huge help in understanding what it's like to be a man.
Thank you, Isaac. And for our panelists, let us be as succinct as possible so we can get the audience to be able to participate. Whoa, Dr. Smith. Whoa, Dr. Smith.
My son was so impressed with his crispy hair. My son was like, I gotta get to the barber shop.
I was saying you should go ahead and wrap it up. You're so eloquent with it. No, I think, so I have sons. I have 3 sons. And I was talking earlier about how I used to treat them, and I put hypermasculinity on them. If that's the word we're using. I used to, shut up, boy, you don't cry. Boys don't cry and do all that. And I realized, I had nieces too, that I would treat them totally different. When they was hurt or when they was crying, I would address them in a more delicate fashion. And I realized that my sons needed that same thing. And so my approach with them was different. As a dad, or as dads, we define ourselves through how we raise our sons, and we see ourselves in them. So I tried to be a better man for them and tried to show them, yeah, you can still be a man, and there's more to a man than just being tough and just laughing. Like, it's okay to cry. Dads cry too. I cry. Now I cry 11 times a week. I feel like I'm overly sensitive now, but I tried to teach them that, like, it's okay to cry, it's okay to show your emotions, it's okay to be vulnerable, instead of the tough, and that's good too, but that's all I was showing them at one point. And then I had to turn around and say, no, it's okay, it's just like your cousin or just like my niece. It's okay to be vulnerable, and it's okay to cry, and it's okay to show your emotions, because that's what a human does. Like, it's male and female, and so we are all the same. So that's how I try to teach and educate. And therapy, we didn't grow up believing in therapy, but after going through therapy, I think everybody needs somebody to talk to in some way, shape, or form. And so I tell my son, you should go to therapy, talk to somebody. If you can't talk to them, come talk to me, talk to your mom or whoever. But I think education on that is important as well.
I'm gonna keep mine real brief. And I'm going to paraphrase the philosopher Cat Williams. Sometimes I have to look in the mirror and I say, you having an unnatural allegiance to losers is not like you. And anything that would cause me to shrink or not stand in my greatness is what I would label a loser. And having an unnatural allegiance to those things is not like me.